So a lot of players, especially returning players, but players like me who have a little bit of a boomer take on Yu-Gi-Oh currently, will hail, the old school Yu-Gi-Oh as the best time ever, right? Or at some specific point that you grew up playing the game that you think if the game just went back to that time, the game would be better, right? That's pretty common argument and thing that we've heard in this community over and over again, right? And this is why there's formats that were created like GOAT and Edison, which I play a lot of them. I wanted to talk a little bit about this kind of perspective on this video and why I don't think that GOAT and Edison are the solution. While they're very fun and I think they definitely serve a purpose and they hold a place, they're more of a band-aid on a bigger problem that I think has a better solution than being the end-all solution as well. And I think that people who often say this either don't play the game anymore or they go to GOAT and Edison for a little bit and they don't play it for very long. And the reason is obvious, is because it gets stale, right? There's a reason why new stuff is always coming out. It's because the old stuff will get stale eventually. So I wanted to address this perspective, and kind of a solution that I came up with, and that I think other people have thought about it to an extent as well, that I think could really, really help, quote unquote, fix the game, and it would be a fun solution for everyone. I think that everyone would be able to enjoy the game the way they want it if this was implemented. So I'm going to talk a little bit about GOAT format and Edison format for Yu-Gi-Oh, which are pretty much all that I play these days. I do still play a lot of Master Duel as well, but honestly, at least for the last 2 or 3 months, that's all I've been playing on Dueling Book or in person, really. That's the only format that I can still enjoy this game in person, to be honest. It's either going to be GOAT or Edison. The problem, though, is I don't think that these formats are the solution. And a lot of people, whenever we're talking about, discussing Yu-Gi-Oh! And the state of the game, I've done a first video on this channel, which I don't think was the best video. I like to think I've gotten better at least not coughing into the microphone. So I'm going to reiterate some of the points that were made on that video and kind of my solution to make the game a little bit better. And this is also going on another video that I did, which is regarding the art of Yu-Gi-Oh!, the artistic essence of Yu-Gi-Oh! Losing its essence. Another video that I did compared to Flesh and Blood as well. I kind of want to bring all 3 of those topics together into this, because when we're discussing the problems that people have with Yu-Gi-Oh!, such as turns that never end, omni negates, unbreakable boards, no back and forth anymore, no variety, things being designed on turn 1, I mean, you name it. There's a lot of, just from a strictly like mechanical perspective, even if you like the game, that's great. There's a lot of people that are not super hyped about the current game, or they're bored of it. People always say that the solution is going to be alternative formats, right? They always go, oh, just play Edison, just play GOAT, which I do play those a lot. I do think that that's probably the best thing that we can do as of now, right? But I don't think that they're entirely the solution. And I'm going to reiterate a solution that I had in another video. Hopefully I can make it a little more coherent on this video. But first I'm going to explain why I think that GOAT and Edison are not the solution. If you've actually played GOAT and Edison for any extended period of time, you will soon find that these become stale very, very quick. People like to, hail GOAT and Edison, and I'm guilty of that to an extent, as the solution for people who are not enjoying the current game anymore, or if the meta, for a while there, Master Duel meta was just tier limits, it was horrible. A lot of people were saying, I'll go back to GOAT and Edison for a while. And while that is very helpful, and those are really cool that they exist, number one, they're never going to be in Master Duel because they're not officially recognized by Konami. And the number 2 problem with them is they get stale as well. Because what you got to understand is that there are no new cards that get released for those formats. Because these are formats of cards that have already been out, and honestly most of them are no longer viable, it is a format that is restricting the card pool, limiting the game to only a set amount of cards. And while that has its value and its charm, especially for people who are returning players or people who want to recapture the nostalgia of the old game, trust me, if you haven't played them for long enough, they do get boring at one point. There is nothing new being produced, and that's the problem, and that's why I don't think these are the solution to fixing Yu-Gi-Oh, quote unquote. If there is anything that needs to be fixed, in my opinion, it does. A lot of people don't feel like it does. The main issue that a lot of people have is they want to continue to get new stuff for the game, but they don't like the direction in which the game has gone. And because the Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't have a season model, and that causes power creep to just be insane, because it incentivizes the company to keep making better cards so that the old ones become obsolete. It causes this insane power creep into the game, where it's just become out of control and it's not really fun anymore, and it gets too complicated. And it's not even complicated from an intellectual sense, like you don't understand what's going on. There's too much going on within the same span of time in my turn while you're playing on your turn and I'm playing on your turn type of thing, that it becomes annoying. Like Yu-Gi-Oh, I don't see it as much, I don't feel like it's gone more complex necessarily. It's become more annoying and frustrating, and there's more going on within the same turns because the same card needs to have 5 to 10 effects, right? It needs to be, every card is like overtuned and overloaded now, and it needs to be, because for it to be relevant in the current meta, that's how it has to be. And every time you want to release a new deck and you want to sell it and you want to make it outshine the previous ones, you got to keep making it crazier and crazier. But then the other spectrum of that is playing a super limited format with nothing new that comes out. And I'll reiterate this again. My solution to this, which I've heard of formats that try to do this, I forget the name now of the format. Somebody brought it up to me on Reddit a while ago, and somebody on the comments brought it up to me recently. Should probably look at it, what it is essentially doing a tiered system for the game. And this is not just different from this format. It's not just a tiered system where it restricts cards from a certain era of being played in these different tiers and having, so like say the way it would work like this. So for people that like playing old school Yu-Gi-Oh, there would be a tier where you can only play with cards that are within this tier of play. They only came out from this year to this year, or they would only, even if they came out later, it doesn't matter because they would only be relevant in this meta and this tier. And they cannot be played in other tiers, or other cards cannot be played in this tier. And then let's say you're a guy, you know, you like the GX era. You want to play with heroes and things like that. So that would restrict everything only to being from that tier, that season. Let's say you like the 5Ds era, but you're not a fan of pendulums and links. There would be another tier, which would be the 5Ds tier, where you can only play cards that are from within that era. But even if you did that, well, I think essentially what you're doing is you're fixing the problem with the same solution that Edison and GOAT already tried to fix, right? You're essentially creating a restricted tier format, which are some of these tiers, it's like this format I was mentioning that I forget the name, that try to do something similar. The thing is the way to fix this, to implement this system and still keep things spicy, is somewhat obvious to me, is to continue to release cards specifically for these tiers. I've mentioned this again on the first video I made for this channel. I'm just trying to make it a little more coherent and understandable. Essentially, what you would do is, the main motivation for Konami to do this is always going to be profit, right? So why would they make it so you don't want to play the current game if you just make these alternative formats that everybody's playing? The card pool is limited. If everybody switches to GOAT and Edison, they can't really sell a whole lot of new cards because there's nothing new coming out. So there's no motivation for the company. And for us, the downside is it's going to get stale and old very quick. So a good solution would be dividing the game into tiered systems and producing new cards that are only viable in this tier, in this season, quote unquote, in this tier of play, right? So if you like, I always use Zack Sabres as an example, but let's say you like Destiny Heroes. Konami would keep producing new Destiny Heroes, new Elemental Heroes that wouldn't be viable or relevant in the current meta of the game, of the modern game, but within this tier of play, they would be relevant and interesting. And then if they make a card for this tier that ends up being overtuned or too strong, ban it within this tier and maybe make it playable or allowed in other tiers. It just might mean they made a bad card design that was intended to be played on this tier, and make specific ban lists for these different tiers of play. I think that I've mentioned this. I think this would be a great solution because it allows people to play on multiple tiers, because, hey, I like old school Yu-Gi-Oh, but I like playing the new stuff sometimes. Sometimes I want to play Edison. Sometimes I want to play GOAT. This lets you play on every tier in essentially time period that you liked of the game, but it also gives the company the ability to keep producing new product, and it gives you something, for us as well, it gives us something to continue to look forward to and innovate. So the company is essentially producing, not to reiterate too much, but they're essentially producing products that are for different tiers of play, and we get to engage in all of these different tiers of play. So it's not like a season model where, oh, cards that were from this season can no longer be played now. It's that they can only be played on this tier of play, and they're being specifically produced for this tier. That will make the company a ton of money, because now people are not just playing within the current meta and the current season. They're buying the old stuff again. They're buying the new stuff that is made for the old concept of the game. They're playing the current game and buying the new stuff as well. That's going to capture the old players who are sick of the current game. That's going to keep the players who enjoy the new stuff, and it's going to create this blend of people like trickling down, trying out different formats, and essentially seeing what's up without restricting anyone to just be having to play this one specific thing, which is either the current season, the current meta, or going to some old alternative restrictive format like Edison and GOAT, right? Which is the main problem. They're super restrictive and they get old. I think that this would be a solution that makes it so that everybody that wants to play on every level gets to enjoy every tier of play, and we still get to see innovation and new things come out to make the game not stay stale for too long, right? And for the company, it would be a huge profit motivator, right? I think that this is the solution. That's my opinion. Let me know what you think.